Hi, my name is James Rankin. I am going to record a video today to explain how you can lock PowerShell down in a Windows end user client environment. Now, I know I specifically look at Citrix environments, VMware View environments, Windows Virtual Desktop, RDSH, Parallels, any kind of SPC or VDI. But what I'm going to talk about today is probably equally applicable to any Windows platform, any Windows client platform where you're trying to lock down PowerShell. Now, if you get an intruder inside your environment, mainly what the first thing they're going to try and do is laterally move through that environment to gather information, do reconnaissance, to look for vulnerabilities, to execute scripts, executables, basically to try and extend their reach into your network, to move laterally, to get into more systems, to escalate their privileges, broaden the scope of their attack, hide, read information, steal information, all sorts of things. And one of the first things that they'll go for, and this is why you'll find out that penetration testers and security teams and ethical hackers will all call it out straight away as a big problem, is Windows PowerShell. Windows PowerShell is like a Swiss Army knife, really, within the Windows operating system. It lets you do all sorts of things, all sorts of really useful commandlets in there that can dig in not just into the Windows registry and the Windows file system. They can connect to websites, connect to ports, all sorts of different things you can do with Windows PowerShell. So it's very important to secure that from a user perspective. Now we're going to divide this into kind of two bunches of users. We're going to have one set of users that we're going to say these users don't need to run PowerShell at all. They should be totally blocked from it. I'm going to show you how you can do that. Also, we're going to look at users who may need to run bits of PowerShell as part of their jobs. So, for instance, you may have a user who maybe needs to run PowerShell as some sort of admin task. Maybe they're gathering information from Active Directory or something like that. Or maybe there are things I've seen such as YubiKey multi-factor authentication where they use PowerShell scripts to do the registration. So some users, we'll also look at getting some users who may need to use bits of PowerShell, how to restrict and monitor what they do to make sure they're not getting up to anything they shouldn't. So a defense in-depth strategy based around two sets of core users. So I have over here a Citrix storefront instance that I'm going to log on to. As I said, we're going to be showing you this on a Citrix virtual apps server, a user logged onto there using Windows Server 2019, but most of these will apply to any modern Windows operating system. It doesn't have to be a virtualized or a server-based computing environment. It can be a standard Windows desktop. So let's just get this user logged on to this Server 2019 desktop that we have here. First thing we're going to do is just show you a user in unrestricted mode, which this user is, how they can potentially get into PowerShell. There are many entry points to PowerShell. What's the easiest one to find? Pick the shortcut off the start menu. There you go, you're running it. If you haven't got the shortcut in the start menu, then click run, type in PowerShell, and off you go. They're in there again. If you haven't got either of those things, you could simply search for the executable via the start menu. The indexer will find it, and you can run it again. But even if you haven't got any of those things, if the user can do, they can simply browse through the file system, go into the Windows folder, into System 32, into the Windows PowerShell folder, into the subfolder, and they can run PowerShell from there. They can even run, don't forget about the PowerShell editor, PowerShell ICE. That lets you execute scripts and command lines as well, so don't forget about the access to that. And also, don't forget, it's not just the System 32 folder where these executables sit. Don't forget there's the 32-bit folder, syswow64. You can achieve exactly the same thing by going in through there and running the executables there as well. So, this first user we're going to look at from a perspective of let's block them from using it entirely. So let this user here, this user called J Rankin, we don't want him to be able to run PowerShell at all. Now when it comes to blocking executables, usually the first thing that people think of is Windows Defender App Blocker, which is pretty good. Yeah, it's part of group policy. You create rules based around various configurable settings, and the upshot of it is a user tries to run PowerShell and it pops up something saying this app has been blocked by your system's admin. However, I am leaning away from App Blocker and using FSLogic's app masking rules instead to block access to PowerShell for users who don't need it. Now some people go, ooh, you know, that might cause a bit of a problem, but I don't really see it like that. I kind of think that whether you're using AppLocker or an FSLogix rule to block a system file, if you get it wrong, either one of those is going to give you a problem. So you've got to be careful with an FSLogix rule or an AppLocker rule. What you've got to be careful is to restrict it to specifically the set of users who you know don't need to run PowerShell. If you then block the system account or a service account from being able to run PowerShell, then potentially you could cause some application level problems. So let's look at it from that perspective. I'll just drop over here to a session on my domain controller. I'm going to create an FSLogix app masking rule to mask PowerShell. So if I run the FSLogix apps rule editor here, we're going to create a bunch of rules in here. So let's just create a new rule. Let's give it a name like block PowerShell. Use a blank rule set, and in here create some rules. So first rule, they're all going to be hiding rules. This one's going to be blocking a file stroke registry value. Browse for a file, type in C, you can get it right, :/Windows, System32, Windows PowerShell, version 1.0, and in here firstly select the PowerShell executable. Click OK. You'll get a warning because it's a file in the system folder. Don't worry about that. Continue on to the next one. Again, same settings. Browse for a file. This time we'll get PowerShell ice.exe from there. Now, don't forget, as I said, we've got to go a few folders up to find the syswow64 folder as well. So let's grab that one. Again, down to Windows PowerShell, into the subfolder. PowerShell.exe, and then another new rule hiding from there as well, PowerShell ice. Now this hides all the executables and blocks those from execution, which will work, but if you want a more seamless, a bit of a smoother way, you can also hide the shortcuts that the user will invoke PowerShell through as well. Now, we create a new rule, this time another hiding rule, but this time for a directory. What you need to do is understand where your user shortcuts are. I know for a fact that mine are in the all users profile area. So that's C, program data, Microsoft, Windows, start menu, programs, Windows, PowerShell. Now hide that entire directory. You may find, depending on how your image is set up, depending on how your default user profile is set up, that might be a user area that you have to block. But just make sure you block the PowerShell shortcut directory as well. So I'll add that one into there. So that should do everything for me. However, what you need to remember is to do the assignments. Click on Manage Assignments. You'll see there is a default assignment of everyone and the rule doesn't apply to it. For this case, keep that one there to make sure you don't inadvertently block out any system or service accounts that may need to be able to run PowerShell. What we need to do is now add underneath either a specific group of users or a specific user, which we're going to do in this case, that we know doesn't need to run PowerShell at all. So normally I'd do this by an AD security group, but just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to add a single user from my domain, user that we used to log on, JRyan, the first one. So these new rules are read from the top down, they're iterated downwards, so that it will say the everyone group, the rule doesn't apply unless you match the next rule, which normally would be an AD group. In this case, it's just a single user. So click OK there, save it, and then we can close that down. Now by default, these rules are written to your documents folder. What I'm going to do is just copy them into a network shared area where I know I'm going to store my rules and then copy them down to my target device. So I have an admin session to my Citrix server. I'm only using one Citrix server in this farm at the minute. Now normally you would use something like group policy preferences or a script of some sort to copy the files down, the FSLogix rules files, from this central share to the right folder on all of your targets. For the purposes of this demo, I'm literally just going to copy them across manually. So if I go in here, I will grab these FSLogix rules, copy them, and then search for the directory on the machine that they go into, which is this one. Paste those in there. They'll be instantly picked up and processed by the FSLogix driver and popped into the compiled rules folder, as you can see there. Now these should take effect absolutely immediately. So let's switch back to the user session and see what has happened. So can the user still run PowerShell, for instance, by using the run menu? They can't. It can't be found. Now if we go in another of the entry point ways, via the start menu, you'll see here that the shortcuts are still appearing on the start menu. But don't forget this user was logged in when we applied those rules. That start menu is built when the user logs in. It's composed then from all the available shortcuts. So these are kind of like little phantoms still hanging about. But if you click on them, you can hear me clicking on them there, they don't work. So they're no longer available. They're non-functional. And if we log out and back in, which we'll do in a minute, you see they should actually disappear. But also just to see, can I go into the file system and browse down again into the Windows folder, System32 folder, and Windows PowerShell folder to see if they're there. And now the user can't see the PowerShell eyes or PowerShell exe at all. It's blocked, not even by execution, it's as if they're not even there. So just as I said, in the interest of posterity, let's sign the user back out and then we'll sign back in again. Watch as it recomposes that desktop and see if the shortcuts have gone as well. So let's just relaunch the desktop connection. What we should find is when the user logs on, it takes maybe 10-20 seconds after log on, it will iterate through all the available shortcuts and populate that start menu kind of on the fly with what it thinks is available. And what you should find is basically that those shortcuts that were still remaining there, the Windows PowerShell shortcuts, should have disappeared completely, and the user will have a kind of seamless transition from being able to execute PowerShell to not being able to execute at all. If we just give it a second here and see if my timing is good, just click on that. Oh, you just saw it disappear from the start menu there, so now you can't see it at all. Even if we do that search for PowerShell.exe, it says no results found. So for this user or group of users that we wanted to block PowerShell entirely for, we have managed to do that with 2 FSLogix rules, free product from Microsoft, dead easy to set up. That's done. Now we said you may have other users that potentially do need to run bits of PowerShell. So let's log out from that user and log out from the storefront and log back on as a different user, JRankin2. Now this user isn't covered by that FSLogix rule. Let's remember that we applied it to a specific user. So this user should still be able to see and execute PowerShell because we are kind of postulating that this user has some need to run bits of PowerShell. So what we're going to do is restrict the PowerShell that they can run and also keep an eye on what they can run in order to make sure that they don't get up to any mischief. So let's just have a look at what we've got here. They can still see PowerShell on the start menu and they can run it okay from there. That's excellent. Now if we look over here, we'll see we've got a quick one-liner of PowerShell in there. Basically, it creates a new directory in the C drive. I'll just check that it isn't there already. It isn't. Now, the default behavior for PowerShell is not to allow unsigned scripts to run. However, you may find in a lot of enterprises they do allow unsigned scripts to run, which is what this script is here. So let's just try and run this unsigned script here and see that it has successfully executed. We have a directory there called test, and that's not good. We don't want to be allowing users to run unsigned scripts. So the first port of call we want to make is to find a way to disable those unsigned scripts from running. The easiest way to do this is through group policy objects. I've already got group policy management open, and I've already got a PowerShell policy here that's applied to the OU that my server resides in. And if we have a look, if we go to computer configuration, policies, admin templates, Windows components, Windows PowerShell, this is the one that's kind of in error here. Turn on script execution, set to enabled, set to allow all scripts. You'll see lots of places have this set up, mainly for legacy scripts to run that do kind of inventory, data gathering, logon scripts, all sorts of things. But really, we shouldn't be allowing any unsigned scripts to run. So get this changed to allow only signed scripts. Click OK. It's now changed on the domain controller. So if I flip back to my admin session on this machine and run a GP update, what it's going to do is it's going to bring down those updated policy objects and hopefully block that unsigned script from being able to run. So the policy's finished applying there, so let's just flip it straight back over here where this unsigned script is, try and run it with PowerShell again, and this time we see it hasn't successfully executed. So now we're blocking unsigned scripts from running, so the user that is allowed to run PowerShell is a bit more secure. Now of course that stops them from running unsigned scripts, but if I simply type in to PowerShell that command line there, this will run successfully because the user is allowed to execute bits of PowerShell. However, this raises up another problem. If the user is allowed to execute bits of PowerShell from the PowerShell console, how do we know that they're not up to no good? Now PowerShell has an event log. We open up Event Viewer from the admin session, go into Applications and Services Logs, and open up the Windows PowerShell log here. There is stuff being logged about PowerShell in there, the events are being logged. However, the one that tells you what users are running is event ID 800, and if I filter this log by event ID 800, we'll say there's nothing in there. So that user is running a command, yet we aren't able to see that it's being successfully audited. So that isn't great, we don't need that. So what we shall do is we'll just clear the filter on there. We'll now turn on PowerShell auditing. So back across to our domain controller, the exact same area of group policy objects, so we don't need to go anywhere else. We have a number of PowerShell logging policies. Set this one to enabled. This one lets you do specific modules. Click on show. If you want to do specific modules only you can, but a wildcard star will do everything. Also turn on PowerShell script block logging, enable that. Yep, let's go full logging on there, and also turn on PowerShell transcription as well, lets you capture the input and output of the commands into text-based transcripts, and let's send that to a local log file called PS logs. Now, one thing to obviously be aware of here is we've turned on quite detailed logging, we've sent it to the local event log, we've also sent it to a local directory. Don't forget, at enterprise scale, you'll need to collect all of these event logs and local logs together and upload them into some SIEM tool. So you've got a centrally managed, easily visible and well retained sort of database of all those logs. So if you get an attack that happened 6 months ago, you can go back through it, you can be sure the event logs won't have overwritten themselves. Don't set all this stuff up and then forget to log them out somewhere where they're easily accessible and easily retained. So now that we've done that, let's just run another GP update there. Now this one actually needs a log off before it'll take effect for the user session. So while that GP update's happening, we're just going to do a quick log out for the user. GP update's finished, so let's log the user back in again. Right, so if we open up PowerShell again for this user, and if we repeat that command, command is obviously completed successfully. You can see it's in there. Now if we switch back to the admin session, open up the event viewer and refresh it, you don't need to filter it. We can see right at the top we have a bunch of 800 events logged in there with all kinds of detail for us. Let's just find the one that actually shows us the command line that we've got in there. There it is there. So we can see from the log, there's the user ID, tell what host they're using, the engine version, and you can see the command that's been run there. New item, type directory C:/test. So now this user's use of PowerShell is being fully audited, and you can also see in there the PS logs folder that we set up that again keeps the PowerShell transcripts of what's going on and the output from it as well. So you've got very detailed logging now going on for PowerShell. So that also is really, really good. However, there is, and this is why I'm going to clear this event log over here now, just to show you what's going on. Clear the PowerShell event log. Now, actually I should have just quickly showed you that. If you don't know what version of PowerShell you're running, because you should use as upstream a version as possible, here we've got version 5.1, right? So fairly new version of PowerShell installed on there. However, the user can, if possible, use this command here, PowerShell -version 2, to actually run the older PowerShell 2.0 engine. Just show you PS version table in there. You can see it's a different version. Now if I then run that command again, or a command like it, test v2. So we've now created, as we can see, a test v2 directory in there. Let's go back to the PowerShell event log and see if we've got any record of that. And as you'll see by looking through these, we don't have any record of that command being run. There are entries in there that show some kind of execution, quite detailed ones, but none of them actually shows the name of the command that user has run. I know there's lots of stuff here, but I've done this quite a lot. PowerShell version 2 doesn't let you audit the actual commands that are being run. So this isn't very good, because essentially the user could almost use PowerShell version 2 as a backdoor into the system. So how do we block this? This needs to be blocked on the image level. So essentially you'd be best off doing this within your master image or your build, or whichever way you choose to do it. Because I've only got one server in here, I'll show you how to do it within that by running it on this server. So we actually do it. You can do it via Server Manager if you want. By going into Add Roles and Features when it's finished completing. Go to the Remove Roles and Features wizard. And down here you can remove Windows PowerShell and the PowerShell 2.0 engine. You can remove PowerShell ICE in there as well. However, possibly faster way of doing it is to actually use PowerShell itself and take a command of this, disable Windows optional feature, Microsoft Windows PowerShell v2, run that. Don't forget to elevate when you do this. Schoolboy error. Let's try running that again. Just cancel out of there. That should invoke the removal of the PowerShell version 2 engine from your server or your base image, your golden image, whichever way you're doing it, without taking as long as it does from here. We can probably check that it's been removed by having a look and seeing what the status of it is. So let's just have a quick look under Windows PowerShell, and we say that 2.0 is now not installed. So either of those methods will work equally well. So if we switch back to the user session now and try that little trick again to run PowerShell -version 2, this time it can't be run. So again, we've closed off another little loophole that we've potentially got there. Now the final thing that we can close off is the PowerShell Language Mod. PowerShell kind of has two language modes, so this user runs it here. There's one called Constrained Language Mode and one called Full Language Mode. The idea is that Constrained Language Mode blocks access to things like .NET assemblies and things like that are the real down and dirty ways you can get quite deep into the guts of a system. Type in this command, execution context, session state, language mode. It shows you the language mode that you're in a minute. And this non-admin user over here is running in full language mode. So how do we set them to run in constrained language mode? Now really you should use something like device guard to do this. because that lets you do some proper sort of code signing repositories. However, there's a little trick you can use in the meantime. You can set an environment variable for PS lockdown policy, which will force everything on a particular box into constrained language mode. So if we flip back to our PowerShell GPO, for the final bit, if you go into Preferences, Windows Settings and Environment Variables, create a new environment variable, set it to replace, call this variable __PS lockdown policy and give it a value of 4. Click on OK on that. If we then do a GP update on here once more and let that environment variable come down, we should see, if we run control panel applet on here, go to advanced, go to environment variables, we now have that environment variable is set on the machine. Yeah. So then if the user over here invokes PowerShell again, this time it says constrained language. And actually, interestingly, this also applies. Now, this is very important for what we call zero trust environments now. So a lot of people now say that we should adopt the approach that even an admin account can be compromised. So if on one of your session host servers or whatever system it is that you have runs as an admin, and let's repeat the same thing here. Also, the admin is now in constrained language mode. Now, obviously, the thing to remember is an admin being an admin could simply go and delete the group, the environment variable that applies the group policy object. However, this is the reason why group policies refresh. We're not looking to stop them absolutely. Admins are difficult creatures to stop in their tracks. What we're looking to do is slow them down and make, you know, some time for us to be able to detect them, and hopefully you'll be able to detect it through the PowerShell auditing. You'll be able to see that somebody had done something like that, run something outside of constrained language mode. And the thing to remember is, what you should also do is remember, if a user is an admin on this box, make sure they're not an admin on every other box as well. So if you've got a user on here who's a Citrix session host admin, don't make them a licensed server admin and a database server admin as well. So if you do get a compromised administrator, they can't attack your entire infrastructure at once with that one account. And this also raises the concept of, if all the admins on these boxes are running in constrained language mode, how does an admin ever run anything that needs full language mode? This introduces the concept of PAWs, privileged access workstations. So you have nominated workstations that are for high-level admin access only. They don't have the environment variable applied. They have a very small set of admins who can log on to them, trusted admins as far as you can get, and they can run remote PowerShell scripts against these servers rather than having to log on to them directly. So there's a bunch of good tips on how to disable PowerShell. If you've got users that don't need PowerShell at all, block them using FSLogic's rules. If you have users who need to run bits of PowerShell, make sure that they can't run unsigned scripts, that you have full auditing turned on, that PowerShell version 2 is disabled, and that you've got constrained language mode enabled for everybody on those boxes. Those are some good tips that should help you reduce the potential attack surface of your systems quite considerably. Thanks.